Today we're looking at how you can apply kerning to text you have in your InDesign documents. Many of these tools and features are available for kerning in all the Adobe programs, particularly InDesign, Illustrator, and Photoshop. For our purposes, we're working in InDesign, and I am working on a PC, although these features work the same if you're using a Mac. I do have my properties panel open. I have also set my InDesign to show the control panel at the top so we can see the different places that we might change some of these settings. First, we're going to take a look at metric kerning, which when applied to all text within a text box or paragraph will use the same amount of even space between all letters. For some fonts, that's a really good choice. Additionally, we're going to look at optical kerning, which works to kind of balance space between different letters, and for some fonts is a really good choice to apply kerning without having to do a lot of manual work. And then we're going to look at the variety of ways that you can apply kerning manually to letter pairs within text that you have. So first, I'm going to click in my text box, and I'm using the keyboard shortcut Control-Command-A to select all the text. I have to have my text selected to apply kerning to it. Next, in my character panel or my control bar with the character panel visible, I can go into my kerning field and choose what I'm going to use. So in this case, we are going to use metrics. I do believe that that is the default applied to the paragraph style default in the document. And we can see that that reasonably spaces text here. Next, if I want to apply optical kerning, I'm going to, again, Control or Command-A to select all of this text. And in this dropdown for kerning, I'm going to choose optical. We may not see much difference immediately, but they are two different ways to kern your text. Depending on what font is being used, you can see pretty substantial differences in the spacing of text, whether optical kerning or metric kerning is applied. Next, we're going to take a look at manual kerning. This is more often what we use when we are kerning headlines, subheadings, larger text, or troublesome fonts. We can see in this example, some of our letter pairs, like the V and E, have a lot of extra space. The T and the O. Any of our slanted letters or letters that have crossbars tend to have some issues with metric spacing for creating too much space between the letters visually. So when I want to kern my text, I want to put my cursor between the two letters that I want to adjust the space between them. If I come here to my character panel in the properties panel, this same field can be used in our control bar across the top here. So that would be our kerning. I can directly type in a value. Positive values will add space, negative values will reduce space. So here I'm going to say -20. I can also click the drop down here and choose a number. With my cursor placed in the text and then going into the field, I can also use the up and down arrow keys on my keyboard to add or remove space. There are preference settings for how many increments that can move in, so we see that this is moving in 10-point increments, and I can make those changes. I'm going to go ahead and set this back to 0. And instead, I'm going to show you what my preferred method is. Typically, kerning is done as a visual determination of how much is too little or too much space. So I tend to zoom in quite a bit so I can really see that space. And I only have to put my cursor between the letters. I do not have to select both letters. So I put my cursor here. If you hold the Alt or Option key on your keyboard, and you use left and right arrow keys on your keyboard, This will add or reduce space. Left will reduce space. The right arrow key will increase space. So in this case, I want to reduce some space. And I'm just going to do this until it visually looks about to be even spacing before and after the letter. So I'm going to do the same thing with the word to. I'm going to tuck that in just a little bit. That might be a little too much. In other places, I see this T here is kind of touching the U. Maybe I don't want that. I'm going to give it just a little extra space. And we can see that as we adjust space between the letters, it does affect all the letters after it as far as what space is being taken up. So it will potentially move your text around on the page just a little bit. So again, I can just come into a letter and choose a value. That's probably too much. I can also hold down the Alt key and use my left arrow key on the keyboard to reduce space, or the right arrow key while holding Alt to add space. These techniques work in Illustrator, InDesign, and Photoshop. So be sure that when you're working with text, particularly larger text or decorative style fonts, that you are making sure to kern your text appropriately to avoid issues of readership and to make your text look as good as possible.